Welcome to Talking Tempo. I'm Quincy Campbell, and on today's pod, Nate and Brad talk about their experience at the Tempo home opener from Friday, May 8th. They update the current Tempo roster as league play begins and discuss the Tempo's offensive spacing and general basketball spacing concepts. Now let's start the pod.
Coming through, and Keanu puts it up. Look for Rice. Rice with all the space takes the.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our weekly pod, Talking Tempo, about the Toronto Tempo, Canada's only WNBA franchise. I'm Brad Campbell, and this is Nate McKibben. Each week we sit down, talk tempo, and also basketball and what we're seeing from the tempo and in and around the WNBA. Please do not hesitate, if you like this content, to like, share, and subscribe. We would be greatly appreciated. It would be greatly appreciated, I should say. Now, Nate, let's start it off. So we had the Tempo's inaugural game Friday, May 8th. We are recording this on Sunday, May 10th. We both were there. We enjoyed your season tickets. What were your thoughts on the game?
It was great. I mean, I'm not sure I've ever told you this. I had a really good friend in high school who was a big basketball fan. She played women's basketball. And so as a birthday gift, I got her tickets to the first ever game for the Cleveland Rockers. And that was 30 years ago. So to think how far the WNBA has come, that now we have a team in Canada and the league is doing as well as it is. It was really kind of neat to be part of that and just be present and see Kia talk before the game, who's someone I got a chance to work with when she was in high school, to see Cass Prosper get the first bucket, even though it wasn't for the Tempo, a Canadian scoring on Canadian soil, during the home opener for a Canadian team. To see some of the people that were front row and some of the people in the basketball community, it was an incredible atmosphere to be part of, and kind of a special one. Just to be around so many like-minded people and people that really care about basketball, and specifically women's basketball.
Yeah, I thought generally it was super interesting because, I've been at other sporting events that, playoff games or meaningful games or that kind of thing in and around my existence. But I think what was interesting about that game from my perspective was like everyone kind of like, obviously the Tempo kind of sold it, as a bit of a history making, and obviously it's the first WNBA game of a WNBA team in Toronto in Canada. There's been a WNBA game in Canada before, just not obviously the Toronto Tempo. But I think they tried to almost put the nostalgia out early. They tried to sell it as, this is sort of groundbreaking, and one of their slogans was, what was it? It was like
First never fades.
First never fades. So, they also honored some people in and around some timeouts who were firsts as well, which was pretty cool and interesting as well. And I don't know if maybe in 2006 we're more self-aware of these things now and get ahead of it, which is good. But maybe some years ago they may not have done it in that approach, but I think it was good. It added to the event, and I think a lot of people were kind of bought into it too, and were there for that. So overall, super hyped. Tons of it was loud in there at times, especially at the end of the game when Marbury had that three, I think right at the end of the game, to tie it in the last 2 minutes. It got super loud. People were amped up. Unfortunately, the Tempo took the loss in a tight one. They're an expansion team, folks. There might be a few losses this year, unfortunately, but they're going to build, and I really like the support, and I think it showed that Toronto's really, 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 really ready for this WNBA team, and they're really going to support it throughout the season and moving forward.
And I mean, the other piece, we talked about in the last podcast about how it seemed more accessible. Like, it's professional, and they did a great job with the whole atmosphere and how to set everything up. Everything ran smoothly. but it still seems like, people are talking to the players, people are talking to the coaches. I don't know. MVP of the game might be the little kid on the dance cam that they brought back about 4 or 5 times over the game. Then she ended up on court by the end of it dancing with the dance pack. Like, it's kind of this neat atmosphere where it's big enough as a professional spectacle, but it's still small enough that it's accessible. And just the crowd is very different. So many young people there, and you and I have been around to see the impact of the Raptors. And I remember when they even first started playing and then going through the Vince Carter era. I'm excited to see what the long lasting impact of something like this is. And it's kind of cool to be part of it right from the start. And I'm really glad that, we had the opportunity to be there and be in that crowd and be part of history. Because I don't want to undersell what that is. It is a huge piece of our basketball community. And I think it could be a huge springboard to the future.
Yeah, lots of kids there, which was great. Lots of girls, which was phenomenal. Obviously, which will, like you mentioned, will shape the future, potentially of basketball in Canada as well. Um, Interesting when I was looking at the tempo schedule throughout the summer. Obviously we all have different things going on in our lives and throughout the summer, and I was kind of looking, what other games could I get to? Interesting, they have one afternoon game. Actually, I should say only at 1 p.m. They have two afternoon games all season. They have a 1 p.m. that they host, and they have a 3 p.m. These are home games, especially I'm talking about. Trying to make it accessible to younger people and kids, etc. You might think there'd be a few more afternoon games in there, but obviously trying to schedule professional sports with other things going on at arenas isn't always the easiest thing in the world to do. But again, great atmosphere. Uh, this fan base is behind their team, and it'll be exciting.
Well, Neil, the other thing I would say is I think they've had to schedule really carefully. I mean, obviously they have stuff internally within the league, like they have the World Championships coming up that they're going to have to take a break for. But then with the World Cup being in Toronto, I mean, we felt it coming out of the arena with the Blue Jays game and the Tempo game, and was it the Brazilian national soccer team, the Legends, playing against TFC? Like, there wasn't a whole lot of space getting over the bridge to get to our train to get home. So it was madness to see the number of sporting events and all the people down there in exhibition grounds with everything else going on.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how the World Cup schedule works out or how many games are at BMO Field, but the Coca-Cola Coliseum and BMO Field being literally right beside one another, that would be a scheduling nightmare potentially, right? As you mentioned. So, no, it was nuts as we're walking out of a packed Coca-Cola Coliseum. You've got the football stadium, which I think and then the next day, I guess with Messi in town, they had broke an attendance record. I'm not sure what the attendance was on the Friday night, but there was a lot of people coming out taking the GO train, which we did as well. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
Yeah, so last week in this section we talked about some terms moving forward that we may talk about, or you might hear other coaches in their practices talk about, or post game comments, etc. Today with a lot of the spacing stuff. So not only last week's terms. So if you maybe didn't get a chance to see that one, take a look at the start of the pod. This week we'll talk about some different terms. So some sort of court geography here as well as some things. So the first thing is referred to a lot in basketball as the 45. So the 45 is a 45-degree angle on the court. So the 45-degree angle is also like the wing area. Okay, so we've got two 45s on the court, which essentially would be those two areas. Sometimes you see some side ball screens on the court, or things that happen. You want to get open player, you're going to have a player up here with the ball, and then this player's got to get open on the wing of the 45. That's sort of a court geography point that initiates a lot of offense, or that pass would happen, and it might start some offense. Okay, so you might hear that term. Another term that you may hear is the break. So on this board, you don't really have it necessarily, but if you see pro basketball courts, NBA courts, FIBA courts, the WNBA courts, the three-point shot, which is a very valuable shot, and a shot analytically a lot of teams are trying to get, is the corner three, because it's a shorter three-pointer. There's a shorter distance to shoot the ball here in the corner than on a professional court than it is up top, because if they put the line out that far, you might not be able to stand comfortably and shoot it in the corners. They had to make it a little bit smaller. So on NBA or WNBA courts, is what you have is it's shorter here in the corner, and then it kind of runs up in a straight line this way, and then it starts to bend into the arc. So that bend right there where the straight line turns into the curved line, this area right here on the court is what they call the break. Okay. So you might, coaches may talk about that to a certain point. Like once you get below the break, then it's like a corner three essentially, because it's a shorter 3-pointer. You got a space below the break. Okay. That's what we're referring to and what the coaches are referring to. So we got 45, we got the break in terms of some court geography. Next is the charge circle. Okay, some people call it the smile. So on this board, there's no charge circle. So on courts, you'll see a bit of a, not a half circle, a little bit less than a half circle shaped line right by the basket. That is there because in the rules of the game, if you're going to have a defender take a charge on a player, you have to be above the charge circle to take the charge. If any of your body or foot is on the charge circle, technically that can't be called a foul on the offense. It's going to be a foul on the defense. That also is used by coaches sometimes for offense and, court geography in terms of offense. One thing that we like to do is we want our guards to think about when they penetrate. If we got a player right here and they're going to penetrate the basket, we want to get them as deep as possible as they can get because we want to put pressure on the rim. So we say, like, you should always be thinking about if you put the ball on the floor, can you penetrate and get right to the charge circle? Because that means you're getting deep. That might make somebody help. Right? Because if I get all the way in here, I'd probably have a layup or an easy shot. If a help comes over, then there might be a pass. So last week we talked about the short corner, that area right in here. Okay, there might be a player. If I get to the charge circle, did I make the short corners individual help? Then I could maybe pass and get a layup out of the person in the short corner. Some people like to call that the smile for obvious reasons because in basketball, we like to drive everything down to one word to make it nice and easy. Charge circle, I guess, is too much of a mouthful to say. So we like to say the smile at times. Okay, so that's what that is. But again, more of a defensive marker, but could be used as an offensive term for some geography. Next one you'll hear a lot in this pod and elsewhere is the term single gap or a double gap. In terms of describing penetration opportunities that might emerge. So if I, on this court right now, number with circle in the ball over the number means that individual has the ball. Say I just spaced in this manner, okay, and had like a 5 down in the short corner or dunker spot right there. Say we spaced like this, okay? Generally in this spacing, we're trying to stretch the defenders as much as possible when they're covering whoever, what man they're covering on the court. I'll put the X's as defense here. Okay. A single gap right now is, a lot of times too, we call it the center line. If we drew a line right down the center of the court, right? Defenses talk about this line all the time. Offensively, we want to space the court, and also if we're going to cut it in half with that center line, we want to maximize that space. So in this situation, we got a player in the corner, we got another player up top. This generally like sort of 15 probably to 20 feet apart in these situations. These two lanes, if the one was going to drive the ball this way or drive the ball to the middle, these are called single gaps. Because there's another player somewhat defensively relatively close enough, 15 to 20 feet, that might be able to help on the ball, but also has responsibility to cover the individual that they're covering. We're talking about man-to-man defense here, obviously. Okay, these are called single gaps. So in single gap situation, if this individual was going to drive, if this defender came over to help, right? Now we've made two cover the ball. Then this defender over here is going to have to cover these two individuals for a second defensively. This is the kind of situation that we want to create, is two covering one to then move the ball and create advantage. With single gaps, though, there is a potential that the defender could steal the ball, tip the ball, discourage penetration. So as this offensive player is driving, can this defender come over, potentially another defensive term, stunt or make the ball handler pick up the ball and then recover back to their defender and play their offensive player that they're covering? Okay, so there's an offensive advantage there, but there's still the potential for the defender to be able to come over and potentially help and take away an advantage from the offensive player driving. Any comments there, Nate, in terms of like single gap stuff?
Yeah, and Brad's obviously showing this from a 4-out situation, which is a situation where I'm obviously more comfortable with and what we teach, and obviously Brad teaches it as well. With what Coach Brondello is running, she's actually doing 5-out situations. So the single gaps become even smaller because there's less space on the perimeter. So the concept is still the same with 5-out, similar to what the tempo we're doing, but the space becomes even more reduced. And so much about basketball now is not rotating. It's can we guard one-on-one? And a lot of teams are doing that by providing early help rather than late help. And so that initial defender, it's really the one that you have to start to manipulate and affect. And in a single gap situation, unless it's a really poor defender or unless you have an unbelievable offensive player, attacking single gaps is never going to be a recipe for success. Just because you're not going to be able to get past that initial defender and never force someone to actually help at the rim and rotations, which is where you start to get really open looks, either at the rim for little dump offs or kick out passes. So, same concept is true for 5-out. It's just the spacing becomes even more important and single gaps become more and more difficult to attack.
Yeah, so as you just described there, this would be more of a 5-out situation. So like if the one had the ball, you saw in the 4-out, it maybe 15 to 20 feet. Like what is this now reduced to? This might be like 6 to 7 feet, right? So if this individual decided to drive middle, there's less room that this person now can help on the ball and recover to their man. So it's just less likely you're going to be able to drive to the basket because it's more congested around the 3-point line. Okay, so less of a single gap there. So last one too would be for us today would be a double gap. So let me go back to a 4-out situation, just because it's a little bit easier. So let's say, we've talked about the single gap in this situation. We've got defenders here. Let's say we cut the 4-out. So last week we talked about a burn cut potentially.
Mhm.
Maybe we burn cut that 4-out. Okay, so now all of a sudden the 4 is like cutting through the key or maybe to the short corner, and they sort of space low here as well. Now look at them. If the 1 would decided to go to the middle and penetrate, like how can the corner's man help? How does can help later depending on how deep they get on penetration. But now this double gap right here, all this space right here that has been created, it's you can't help with another individual. So this would be the double gap concept, right? So what you see the double gap concept a lot, and we showed last week with a spread ball screen situation that the tempo would run, and obviously many teams would run. I already have a 3 on the floor, so do I need one to get a 2 in the corner over here, right? Let's say we have a step-up ball screen that occurs to the middle of the floor. So now we have a spread ball screen situation, right? We've got 1's defender, we got 5's defender right here, we got 4's defender, 2's defender, 3's defender. So if this was occurring and we burn cut the 4 out of the way, right? So now the 4 is cutting out of the way and cuts here. As this ball's coming middle and the 5 is diving to the basket, Like, where's that extra help defender to help penetration from the top coming from? We've created a double gap off of that burn cut for this ball handler to potentially get deeper into the key. Now, all of a sudden, does this individual help? If they do, now the corner three's wide open. So again, making the defense make decisions in spacing situations. So we had single gap concept, double gap concept. Nate, anything more on those terms before I throw the last one in here?
No, I think that's perfect. And I think, yeah, you're starting to see some of the concepts that we've looked at through some of the video of some of their actions and some of their offensive principles. It's all trying to create that double gap so people can get downhill. And I think that was something that fell apart a little bit through the game on Friday. And that's just familiarity and being able to play off each other. So how do we create a little bit of space for the ball to attack? How do we create a little bit of space for the action? But really, you want the ball to be attacking open space or a double gap. And so much about basketball is how do we create those double gaps so that you can't use initial help to prevent against penetration just because it makes it so much easier to guard.
So last term too we'll throw out is on penetration, we want to create what's referred to as straight line drives. You also might hear the term, we want to get that player downhill as much as possible. What that's referring to is we, just like any cuts that we want to run cuts at the rim to put pressure on the basket and to play the basket. We want to drive, we want to drive straight line at the rim, because straight line drives at the rim make people come and help and attract people to help. Because obviously, if this person drives straight line and gets all the way to the basket, they're going to get a layup or a point blank shot at the rim. So if you drive in this situation and can get straight line down here, now, does this person come and help? Does this person sag in? Does this person sag in? Did this person come over and help? Like, all of a sudden now it's going to make it easier to put pressure on the rim. A scoring opportunity has been created by that by that straight line drive. It creates other people to come and play. Now are we drawing two to the ball, right? So what I find very common with players that come into our level of play at a high school and otherwise is this concept this simple they haven't really thought of before. Not that they don't do it, they just maybe haven't thought of it in those terms. Because, if you drive to the basket and we want to make two play the ball, if I drive on this defender and sort of start not going straight line, now what happens? This defender can come and also help play the ball more. Also, why would anyone rotate if I'm driving this way? This is not a threat to score, probably dribbling this way. This is a threat to score dribbling straight at the rim. So straight line drive, a downhill opportunity or drive, very important in spacing, drawing to, and then as we're going to get into, as we're going to see from film later in the pod, now we've got to keep the integrity of the perimeter spacing around those straight line drives to the basket. That is teaching tempo for this week.
Now we get to geek out on all the basketball stuff. This is the part I've been looking forward to. We've been talking about preseason and going back to Australian national team games. Now we finally get to see some meat and potatoes, which is the part I'm really excited about.
Yeah, we're into the season now. There's no hiding now into the season. Warts are going to be shown. Good stuff's going to be seen. And our segue, our smooth, seamless segue leading into the next section would be their roster updates. So now, in a very short period of time in their training camp, like a 2-week training camp, and now you got to make some roster decisions. Obviously, this roster is going to fluctuate throughout the season. There's going to be, unfortunately, injuries and other things they're going to have to deal with. Cuts potentially. Maybe some players don't work out that they're going to have to move on from. You can touch on as well, I think, Nate, the way that they're using their two development positions. Interesting situation this year, as we've mentioned in past pods, a new two-player development sort of roster positions that they have. Some teams may use them differently. You can explain that as well. But now we're starting meaningful games, and here's what our roster looks like.
So here we go. So for the final 2026 Toronto Temple roster, at least for the time being, this is what they've gone with. You can actually see, and sorry, Nikolina Milic should be in that orange color as well. She's someone they signed as a development player. But it's interesting you talked about development positions. I think the way that it was intended, or the way a lot of people have interpreted it, is you try to stash young players to see if they develop, and then if you have opportunities over the course of the season, you bring them in for a little bit of experience. The tempo seemed to have gone a very different direction. So Fasula is actually 28 years old, and Milic is actually 32, and both of them qualify based on the way the rules are written. Now, it seems because of their international background, they're more as you'd find in the NBA. So they can be called up to play 12 games over the course of the year. And after they play those 12 games, you either have to put them on your roster or you have to cut them or waive them. So I wouldn't be surprised to see both of them for a good amount of time. I don't know if they'll get to the full 12 where they have to make a final decision, or if they do get to that point, would they make the roster or get cut? But they've gone with a much older player at the development spots. I think with the intent of using them during injury times and potentially even as rotation players if they just want different looks. Someone like Tiona Key, who I thought was going to end up as a development player, has actually made the final roster. So they've actually taken the young players on their roster and gone with older players at the development positions. Now, I also don't know whether that's because if you had to cut them from training camp, they obviously have to clear waivers, and there's been a bunch of that in the NBA where people have been cut, maybe with the intent to become in development and other people coming to scoop them up. So it's a very different approach. The only other one that I'd point out is Yvonne Ejim. They signed her as a training camp player very late in the process. And I think a day or two later, they announced that she wasn't going to play for personal reasons. So I believe they actually keep her rights over the course of the year. So she wouldn't be practicing or playing with them. But if next year during training camp, or they either have the opportunity to sign her or bring her in, where they would sort of own her rights as they go through. The only other one, and we talked about this before, Maria Kludakova. She didn't come over to the WNBA until June last year, so I would still wouldn't be surprised if she might be someone who comes into the roster at some point. Now, the only issue is you would obviously have to get rid of someone on the roster, and I don't know who that would be, but a very different approach to roster development than what other teams have done. I think a very interesting and a very smart way of doing things where I think they're covered and they still have a little bit of flexibility through the salary cap as well. So very different way of approaching things, and I'm actually interested to see how they use this to provide a little bit of depth for their team.
Yeah, and I think as we saw in that first game with lineups they're going to throw out onto the floor, there's definitely going to be a good chunk of time where they're going to go smaller at the 4 spot. So we saw at the 4 spot, we saw Conde play some 4 essentially as a bigger guard. And then we also saw, as you have there in the power forward spot there, Loose Geit. How do you pronounce that?
Juice Skate. I know they were
Juice.
calling her Juice Box in the crowd, so I don't know if that's a formal nickname or not, or whether it's just something people are throwing around.
Yeah, and we saw her at the 4 as well. Remember, she banged down a 3 late in the game. She did a bunch of great hustle plays. Defensively, she was active, but probably traditionally smaller at that spot that you're going to see with. So definitely, the Mystics were huge, and they're definitely a bigger team potentially in the league as well. So sometimes they may have like a lineup you see out there with Sabley and Feg Benley sort of at the 4-5, but we're going to see more of those two smalls at the 4, and honestly, that might serve them better. Obviously, it's always working on matchups in terms of who you're playing and what you can get away with, but maybe as offensive options, they may have a little bit better luck with those two at the 4.
Mhm. And not that you'll see her this year on the roster or playing in any games. The other one I wanted to point out we haven't talked about is Aja Kane. She was actually someone they picked from New York in the expansion draft, and she's just been announced that she's going to play at Southern Methodist University. So there's a player who was literally picked last year by another team, picked in the expansion draft, and now is signed with an NCAA program. So here's this interesting piece where you have professional players that are owned, their rights are owned by WNBA teams that are now playing the NCAA. So it hasn't happened as much maybe on the women's side, but you're starting to see some of the same things that happen on the men's side where players are either owned or been drafted or somehow involved with professionals that are actually going back to play college. So I'm interested to see if she's able to play, and I'm very interested to see how she plays because what a great opportunity to watch a player play in a very good league against other people her own age and sort of season herself a little bit before she gets up to the tempo.
Well, and the weird part about that too is with the strange things or the different landscape we're in with the NCAA now, where they may make just as much money or potentially more going back to play NCAA. So this may not be a decision. I may not want to go pro, or I don't know how I'm going to work out. You just might get paid more by going back to the NCAA, which from someone of my vintage is insanity at this point. But that's the landscape that we're in here.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that this is going to be a roster in 2 months from now. I still think that there's something out there. I get the impression that they're trying to win as many games as possible. Sandy is someone has a reputation of playing older players and not necessarily playing younger players, and obviously very well connected in the international community. So I am interested to see how this roster changes or how they use the development players and how they sort of get some time for key and some of the younger players as well. So, while this is the final roster to start the season, I'm still not sure that this is the roster you're going to see at the end of the year.
Yeah, for sure, change is coming. The length of the season will dictate that. Injuries dictate that. Hopefully, they can just stay healthy and put the best caliber roster they can put out there night to night and get some chemistry while all that's happening as well.
Lots of interesting pieces, and I do like the roster.
All right, so next section here on the pod this week is we're going to dig into some spacing and some spacing concepts and different styles of coaches and their different ways that they like to space. So one thing we did see from the tempo is they have what I would identify and was very interesting to me was a relatively unique style of spacing, something that I'm not too familiar with, to be honest, and it's kind of a 5-out spacing situation. Um, and it starts a lot of times right off the bat in transition. So, as we get into this, I think the way we're going to approach it is we're gonna look at some different things. I'm obviously familiar with a style of spacing that I like. Nate, you definitely have a style of spacing that you like. And again, learning the game and seeing it throughout the world and the way different coaches do things and the incredible experience that Brondello brings to the game, and her resume is phenomenal, not only as a player and as a coach and the success that she's had, their style of spacing, which I find fascinating and interesting that we're going to take a look at here.
Yeah, and through my experience, obviously at the university and international level, just watching what coaches do, so much of the talk isn't necessarily about the actions you run. It's what happens after you've created a little bit of an advantage and how do you keep that advantage. And with the length of time that these players are together for the WNBA preseason, this is where they should be. Like everyone's learning a new system. It's a completely new team. They've had 2 weeks essentially to get ready for games, plus 2 exhibition games. Someone like Conde, who's been here for maybe 4 practices, like this is where they should be. And with someone like Coach Brondello, who's trying to do something different, there's some trends that we've started to see. By no means are we saying that the wrong things to do. It'll just be interesting to see how it develops over time. And I'm actually really interested because it is a little bit different. And she's trying to do some things. I understand why she's trying to do it. It'll be interesting to see when the full package gets in, the players start to understand. I think they buy in. They're definitely trying to do certain things out there. Once the team's all on the same page, the decisions are a little bit quicker and they're able to play off of each other a little bit more. I think there's huge potential for this style of play, especially with this group of athletes. So we're going to watch some of the clips, some good things, some things that are going to get better over time, and then we're going to show a little bit of concepts from us in the half court and then from Brad in the full court and the half court. And it just gives coaches an opportunity to see that this is something all of us work on. There just might be little different ways to do it. And we're excited to see how much Coach Brondello's style evolves over the next couple months. All right, so we're going to start off with a little bit of transition from the tempo, and then we're going to get into some of their half-court concepts. So first things first, we're going to look at their transition spacing. So here, defensive rebound, their forwards is a little bit different. So a lot of people will run a forward to the front rim. The way that they like to space, I think, is somewhat based on Mabry and Sykes. It seems like they want to get those two players into the 45, which means a forward is going to have to fill a corner and another guard is going to have to fill a corner. So you see here the ball is advanced to Conde and then Alamond, but Key, number 7, rather than running to the front rim, is running out to the corner. And then you have Sykes, who sort of wants to play a little bit higher, and there you see almost an exchange to get Sykes up to the 45. So I think it's a way for them to get into their 5-out action is to try to keep their biggest playmakers, which is Sykes and Mabry, at the 45s and get a post to the corner. But it does mean that you won't necessarily have a real visible player that's attacking the front rim. Now, second piece to this, because they sort of have these playmakers that want to play off the 45s, means that they don't always fill the corners. And I think that helps them get into their action. Here you can actually see Mabry and Sykes playing up a little bit higher. But what happens is that they don't use the full length of the court. You know, in traditional spacing, you'd actually want Sykes to go all the way to the corner and then play from that spot. Here you have Mabry on the strong or the bottom of the screen. Obviously, there's already someone in the corner, which is a forward, but you might end up in situations like this. You have Conde, not a ton of space, good attack player who gets to the rim and creates an advantage, but you literally have the other 4 players all above the free throw line. And now you have a situation where she's got to create one-on-one or really 1.5 against the help because there isn't a lot of other players that she can find kick-out passes to. So traditional spacing, someone to the front rim, get people to the corners, but because of the way they want to get into action, they're actually stopping some of their key guards a little bit higher. So they're not always putting pressure on the rim and they're not always using the full length of the court. It'll be interesting to see if they can get into some attacking, maybe a little bit different than what people would otherwise. Here you can see, again, the ball now in Mabry's hands, but because of their spacing, you have 5 people standing perimeter and not a lot of space to attack one-on-one. And Brad talked a little bit about in some of the spacing concepts. Single gaps are incredibly hard to attack because if you see right now, Jusquette, if she goes middle, you actually have Sykes's check who can provide support to the basketball. Or actually, that's Sabley's check, sorry, that can support the basketball. The only way she can really go is baseline, and there's not enough space. If Sabley wasn't in that spot, now there's a little bit more room for her to create one-on-one. And then the other thing you run into is if there's no action, if there's no space, if we don't have opportunities, a lot of times Mabry would try to solve it by running behind the basketball to get it back so that she can create. The only problem is by her coming, you're just bringing another defender into that space as well. So there's less space now to attack. Essentially, you have 3 people within 5 feet and really no room to attack. So eventually they get into a little bit of an action, but just it's tough with not a lot of space and not a lot of flow. But they do end up getting a half decent shot off of that. Now, some positive ones. This was very early in the game. Good hit ahead from Sabley, and I love the run to the rim by Fegbenley. And that's really where she's at her best, is if she can play with her pace, play with her speed, play with her tempo, and be able to get to the free throw line. Here on the defensive rebound, because it's not Mabry and Sykes, you see Kia and Kiki, who are sprinting ahead and using the full width or full length of the court, which is forces people to guard, and it gets Jusquette down the downhill to the rim. And even Sykes is in a really good position there in case for a little dump off pass or potentially get into rebounds. So it'll be the traditional concepts of transition and some of the newer concepts and how they can still create advantages off of that.
You know, a lot of transition clips there too. I think there's always an interesting dynamic offensively in basketball when Do we have a secondary break and spacing that we go through, or are we a fire drill and we're trying to create a 2-on-1, a 1-on-2 immediately? So the one clip you showed where Fegbenley was fouled on that nice pass from Alaman right here on the break, like that is fire. I call that fire drill. Like we're getting out, we're trying to create a 2-on-1 scenario where we can get a layup. We may have a numbered advantage, 3-on-2, 2-on-1, etc., 4-on-3, whatever it is. If things, are a little bit, the defense gets back a little bit, it's not necessarily a numbered advantage, then we're going to go into some organization, which would be probably more like a secondary break style. So what we've seen from the tempo when we've gone through our first two pods is we talked about their offense. They like an open post offensive system. They're not going to post anyone up around the block in the short corner, around the basket. There's not a whole lot of high-low action also that they run, which we did see from the Mystics in this game because the Mystics were a huge team, and that made a lot of sense. This flows into when they go to their secondary action, where Nate pointed out their post or their 4-5, one of their 4-5s is going to fill one of the corners. It opens the post. So it makes sense in the fact that we want to flow into probably some of our offensive actions out of our secondary, and we want our open post system to then transition into that. So that's what makes sense to me is, obviously, and as we mentioned, lots of different styles of secondary breaks and transition actions. This one makes sense because here's our offensive actions, which we've gone over, and then all of a sudden now we can just flow into that easily because of the way that we're spacing in a secondary transition aspect.
Mhm. So as they get into or just gone through some of the transition stuff, this is where they're going to start to get into their half court spacing concepts. And because of the way they do it with the open post, like you said, 5 out, and because they want their playmakers in the 45s and the posts either at the point, corners, or in the other guards sort of filling those spots, it's interesting to see some of the challenges they're going to have, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of their solutions. So some of this is just naturally, this is the time of the year. So attacking single gaps, they're in sort of their flow. They're not really in their play. Now they got 5 out spacing, and Brad talked a little bit about single and double gaps. If you're asking a player like Condé to create right now, whether she goes right or she goes left, you basically have a help or a secondary defender at an elbow. And so there's really not a lot of space for her to create on her own. So by moving the basketball, we're still sort of end up in those single gaps, and there's just not a lot of space to go. And so she goes baseline, which makes it a little bit predictable to the defense and no real advantage gained and forced to take a contested shot, maybe not one that you draw a play up. The only positive to this is one of the advantages of a 5 out system is that if you get people that cut and anticipate someone here like Kiki Rice, huge opportunity to get an offensive rebound. And that's a nice play by her. And I'm confident eventually she'll be able to start to knock down that jump shot. Now, as they started to get into action, that was just flow, no real actions, just having to play one-on-one with not a lot of room. Here you end up in a situation where there's just not a lot of space for them to play. They get a 77 or a double drag or a double ball screen. They get ball reversal into a little bit of handoff. Tries to get downhill, but you can actually see Kiki Rice's players starting to shrink into an elbow. So again, not a lot of space. You have Mabry behind the ball, but her check is sort of in a position to help out a little bit on Drew Scott on the roll. The ball gets kicked out and they get into a step-up screen or another ball screen, but Drew Scott is in the post, and so her and her defender are almost guarding the roll there by Sabali. There's just not a lot of space for their actions, and even they're held running behind the ball, which we talked about from Mabry, but not a lot of room to play, which forces Mabry to take a tough deep shot. Now, can she hit that? Yes, but I think as they get more comfortable with their spacing and understanding what's going on away from where they're at, I think you'll start to see better shots created out of some of those actions.
Yeah, when you're early in the season at this point too, there's too much thinking going on. You've put in your systems, you've put in your spacing. You know, old coach that I used to have, he always used to talk about it doesn't matter what you run, it's how fast and the pace that you run it in. You want to run things at a very quick pace. So when you're getting into some concepts and some spacing and whether I should cut or whether I should hold the corner or how are we spacing you're getting paralyzed because you're thinking too much. So it's going to be really interesting to see as their season goes on, as they get more comfortable with this, as they make little adjustments, how their pace is going to pick up, and therefore, a lot of this is going to be a lot better moving forward.
Mm. Here you have staggers into a little bit of flip, which we've talked about in the past. And you can see coming off the ball screen, it's just no real space to turn the corner. You have Conde's check coming in. You have Alamon's check staying with her. You have Key's check. There was Lauren Betts, who's 6'7" and really good at guarding the rim. There's no real space to turn the corner. There's no real space to pick up the basketball. Real just difficult position to be in. And I think Key, if she steps up a little bit, maybe Conde can back cut. I think it's just as you get more comfortable with it and understanding who you are and who your teammates are, I think this stuff will get cleaned up. I think they're running the right stuff. It's just understanding the timing and who you are and the spacing of some of this, and just
Yeah,
not a lot of room to be able to create.
yeah, Nate. If just go back a little bit to where Alaman takes that last ball screen and turns the corner, as we talked about on the clipboard, the basic concepts of basketball: make two defenders play one, right? So that's why spacing is so important. We want to stretch the floor. We want to make defenders not be able to cover two people. So with this spacing, just continue it a little bit, Nate, as we go down, right? We almost have three players playing the ball at this point. We've got the initial ball handler defender going over the top. We've got Conde's man from the corner is the key. Can Conde's man from the corner, is she playing both the ball and her man? Then the defense is winning right there. So what can Conde do, or how do we correct this spacing so she can't cover two? Does Conde need to cut, or does Alaman need to pass it to Conde? And this is obviously why when you're spacing the floor, you want a lot of shooters, because we're going to see over the course of the season how good Conde is going to be at shooting it. But if she is a high level 3-point shooter, then this defender that we see right here probably doesn't help that far off her, because if Alaman just draws her even a little bit more and passes over, that might be a wide open 3-point shot in the corner. If Conde cuts here, and then we're going to have to create our spacing out of this as well. This is where, we get situations where we gotta maintain spacing and maintain advantage.
All right. So we've watched a little bit of clips of running action with not a lot of space to be able to play. There were a lot of times where Toronto was able to create an advantage. And part of getting used to each other and part of getting used to a new style is just understanding where to be and how to support the ball when an advantage has been created. Now, Mabry showed that she was probably the best offensive player that Toronto had. She hit a bunch of tough shots, a bunch of contested. She had one little runner, which she's really good at. But I do think as they get more used to playing together, you'll end up in situations like this where you can see Mabry has created all sorts of advantages. Like she's going to have gravity where players are going to come to her to try to take away their initial look. And this is where she can start to find some of her teammates. So you can actually see here that she's really drawn 4 players. And Washington almost has 5 players in the paint where as they get used to it, now she'll be able to find kick out passes. Probably the most logical pass here is to throw it back to Conde with her hands up, their number 10. But Almond is probably open with this, and if she's a really good passer, and if Kiki Rice just shifts one way or the other, I think there's another kick-out pass there, or she might even have her post player for a little bit of lob. So all 4 players not with the basketball really are open at this time. So there's all sorts of advantages created and opportunities. Now it's just, are we able to use the ball to be able to find it? Now, she does get downhill, does get fouled. So we get a good shot, and obviously we get to the free throw line, which is exactly what you want to do. But I do think that they'll be able to continue the action and find even better shots as they get on about being able to understand about where the openings are and how to find some of those passes.
Yeah, and this is when you're going to play good team basketball, there's got to be an unselfishness to it. And if you draw two, you got to pass the ball and move it and let your spacing do the work. And right there, Conde, number 10 at the top of the key's wide open. She's got to get the ball, right?
Mhm.
So you got to let her make the next decision, trust in your teammate, trust in her to make the next decision. And, Mabry did a great job of drawing 2 to 3 defenders. Now we just gotta make a decision, make a read, and create the best shot opportunity that we can.
And the one thing they have an abundance of is passers. Like, obviously, Mabry was high assist numbers, Sykes was high assist numbers, Alamond high assist numbers, Conde exceptionally high assist numbers in the EuroLeague. They have a ton of people that can create passes. Even Rice, high assist numbers in the NCAA. I think as they get used to each other, that's really the real advantage of this team is they have great passers to be able to keep some of that advantage. Now, shooting is going to be the next piece, but we'll talk about that as we go. So next set of clips, no movement around the ball. So in the previous clip, we talked about Mabry trying to pass to find the open players. Now we have a situation where we've created a little bit of an advantage, but there's not a lot of movement around her. So she attacks. Again, she's done her job. She's actually drawn two help defenders. The third person there, Rory Harmon, number 3, is rotating, but she has Austin and Iria Finn both coming to help. Sykes's check, which is Cass Prosper, has sort of stayed a little bit, but the three people on the weak side aren't really guarded at this point. And now, how do you move? How do you create a passing angle either with the ball or off ball to be able to find the next player? So, is that a cut from Fag Bentley, 14 off the opposite elbow? How does Alamon shift her position to be able to get the ball? And that's all based on your concepts. And obviously, I would have solutions. Brad, you would have solutions. I guarantee that Sandy Brondello has solutions, but this is the areas that I'm really looking forward to seeing their growth over the next couple games. Is can they move to create some of the space to be able to make this pass? Because again, Mabry makes a really difficult shot, but can we turn a good shot into a great shot later on? Because she did her job. She created an advantage by bringing multiple people to the ball.
Yeah, exact same idea, from the last clip. You draw 2, you draw multiple defenders, somebody's open, now we gotta recognize who it is and move the ball.
So next clip, this is something that all really good teams have to be able to do. Defenses are taught that as an advantage is created, how do you support or help? How do you rotate? And how do you take away the next action? Against good teams, you're not necessarily always going to be able to find a kick out pass to initial shot. A lot of times it's going to actually ask for an extra shot or one or an extra pass or one more. So here we have a step up from Mabry. She does a great job of getting Alamond open. Alamond gets pressure on the rim. She gets into the paint. Some would argue she might be able to shoot here. Obviously, Austin is a really good shot blocker, but really she's done her job by forcing two people to play the ball. Now you have a situation where she's kicked out to Feg Benley on the weak side, and we have Mabry in the corner. So we've created a 2-on-1 where you have Feg Benley and Sykes with Citron number 22 who's guarding both. So on the kickout pass, you can see Feg Benley is open for the shot, maybe a better shooter in the corner. So how do you find a way to get the ball to the corner to the better shooter? And you can actually see in this situation, Alamont is actually pointing to where she wants the basketball to go. We end up getting a wide open jump shot, but from someone who's not necessarily a shooter. There's a way to turn a good shot into a great shot by able to find that next pass. Now, the other piece of this too is if Feg Bentley's maybe not a great shooter and you can see Citron is playing between the passes, if Almond maybe changes her angle, you might actually have Feg Bentley be able to attack off the dribble in this situation too. But these are the types of things that I think they're going to get better at over time and just getting used to each other. But I do think the extra pass or the attack off that weak side is available. They're not there yet, just based on where they are in the season. And
Yeah,
they
if
get a
if I did have a criticism off that clip, I would say, like, Alaman got paint, drew 2, did a nice job there, but where's she going after she passes? So she gets in here. Like, where are you go? Like, you're just bringing any extra defenders or anything over. She's got to respace and get out of there, right? Because if someone decides to drive, whether Feg Benley or Feg Benley makes the extra pass into the corner now, like, if you got to give that person maybe an opportunity to throw down a dribble or two as well. So, like, Alaman does make a great decision here. That shot does go up, and if you have players spacing at the three, they probably have the green light to shoot it, and that shot should go up. But Alaman probably wants to what would we would reterm as a respace.
Yeah. And we would probably want her exiting to the weak side corner to create a little bit of room to play.
And then if you just go back a little bit more on that clip too, just from a spacing standpoint, like Alaman gets into the paint, makes that pass out. So here comes the full clip. Right from the start, good screen, the good rub. Now she gets into here. Now, conversely, hold it right there. Like, you can see at the top of the key, you have Conde and Mabry almost standing beside each other,
Mhm.
right? So literally, defensively, one of those two players could have dropped right into the key to plug it, and one of those players could cover both of those two because they're so close together. So not only we just referred to Alaman maybe respacing as that penetration was happening, like Mabry and Conde should have spaced properly. Because if you can see the court side closest to the camera right now, there's nobody there. There's like how much room of feet right now from Mabry all the way to the corner isn't being filled by anybody or stretching any of the defenders at this point.
And if they want to keep Mabry, they want to keep Sykes at those 45, it's starting to understand, maybe Conde understands that that's not her space and that maybe Mabry sort of I don't want to say trumps what she's doing. So Conde's got to get into that space. And this is why I'm excited to see some of this, because I think there's some concepts that are showing up, but now they got to recognize the concepts and play off of them if there's some things that are really important to them. And this is different.
Yeah, and they haven't played together before, and maybe this is a newer concept to some of them too. It's going to take some time. Ask them to do this in a couple of weeks with a couple of preseason games is not going to be easy.
Yeah, and Conde, I think literally started practicing on Monday. So she's even way, way earlier. And I think that her best basketball is way like in the future, but I'm excited to see her too. So non-shooters on the perimeter. And this is something that I'm interested to see what kind of solutions they have because they want to play forwards in the corners. And you can see here what I would call knock. I don't know what you call. I know you run some similar action where they throw the ball to the guard. Here they create space for the ball screen really nicely with the back screen. You can see Alamond following behind the basketball to open up room for Sykes coming off a ball screen. But as the ball screen goes, Sykes has created an advantage and forced Sabley's check to come over and support a little bit on a drop coverage, or she's back a little bit off the basketball. But what you find, because Fag Benley is someone that they haven't identified as a shooter and maybe someone they'll sag off of, you can literally see Austin standing in the middle of the key, ready to take Sabley, and they're not guarding Fag Benley. And so you're allowing them to help and not really punishing them for helping off non-shooters or someone they've identified as a weaker shooter on the perimeter. So there is solutions to these types of problems, and we'll show one as we go into some of the positive clips. But this is something I think they're going to be fighting against a little bit is like, okay, we're putting our forwards out on the perimeter. People are going to be helping off of what's our solution? What's the next step to some of this action? Because you can see they get a decent shot there, but Fag Benley standing on the perimeter with no one. And now you basically have two forwards boxing out Sabley and no real advantage gain. Now, this was the first play of the game. Sykes did a good job of getting to her pull up and scored. But if teams start to take away that pull up, what's the next step? Where's your advantage? How are we going to play off some of that advantage as well?
On another note, that's the first 2 points in tempo history, is it not?
Yes, that was the first 2 points for the tempo, but I will say this. I was so happy to see Cass Prosper make Washington. She's a player from Montreal, has been part of provincial teams. She played OSBA for Ottawa or Capital Courts, played at Notre Dame, just came into the draft, second round draft pick. Becoming a second round draft pick and making a team is not easy in the WNBA, but for her to make the team, for her to start her first game, for her to play really well, she actually scored the first bucket So first Canadian to score on Canadian soil during the Canadian home opener. Now, did she play for the Canadian team? No, but it was still nice to see Cass Prosper get the first bucket on the court. So now, some different things where they sort of found ways to create a little bit of space. So non-shooter, Key is not a great three-point shooter. You can see her in the opposite corner. They run the same knock action, but this time they get into a little bit of a dribble handoff before the ball screen, and you can see Key has actually cleared that space. Now, the timing might be a little bit off. Alamund, because of the found space, might be able to cut a little bit further away, so her check isn't able to support on the ball like you can see there. She doesn't really stop the ball, but she's still got a hand in that space. But we've created a little bit of space. We've used a non-shooter to cut through. Key's check does stop and contest the ball at the rim, and there might be some different actions they can play off of this, but at least they've created a little bit of movement for forwards on the perimeter that the defense has to adjust to rather than just forward standing on the perimeter where people can help off of. Tough shot, but that's one of the areas that Sykes really excels at is getting to the rim and finishing over bigger players.
Well, and moving forward too, I think what's going to be fun to watch once they get their system in, once they get comfortable with a lot of what they're running, is Sykes is that dynamic player on their team that should be living in the key and in the paint, not only creating opportunities for her to score off of drives, but also she's going to be spraying the ball out to people spacing properly and shooters. She, in my opinion, would be their most dynamic driver and playmaker in this respect. So I think what we're going to see moving forward is, a lot of their offenses, just as this set appears to be this way. What are they going to run to activate her, to get her downhill straight line drives and to get into the key / the paint and make plays?
Mm-hmm. Now, next set, we're getting into a little bit of post circle. So I know they play open post. I still think there's opportunities in some of their ball screen action. So a little bit of transition now. They get into a quick action to create an advantage. So you have Key, who's going to screen for Sykes. A little bit of a step up or a screen towards the baseline. She uses it. She creates a little advantage. She gets downhill. You can see Sabally running behind the ball a little bit to always have an opportunity to make the next pass. But Sykes is able to get 2 feet in the paint, draws two. Actually, have Keys circling underneath the rim. So her check helps on the right side of the court. She gets to the left side right underneath the rim. Sykes might have that little dump off spot, but the other key piece of this is offensive rebounds. She's in a perfect position to get anything that's missed. She gets it. She gets blocked, but she gets herself to the free throw line. So that little simple action of circling under after she rolls creates opportunity for Sykes, but also creates opportunity for herself either on little dump off passes or on offensive rebounds.
Yeah, and again, just good. That's experience and reps to be able to do those kinds of things and to just have that naturally happen without thinking. It takes some time, and that's good to see some spacing taking place on her own there.
Mhm. Now here's double drag or a 77. Because they're using their forwards in screening action, now they're going to get their two best players in the corners. And there's just so much different gravity when they get into this situation. So spacing is up a little higher, a little bit more towards the middle of the court or the midline, which allows Alamon to attack downhill, not get 2 feet in the paint, but at least draw the forward to come over. Nice little short roll and bounce pass to Feg Bentley going to the rim, this is where she's at her best. Draws help, and now especially when you have your best shooters, your best playmakers in the corners, this becomes easy decisions when people help out. Wide open kick out pass, good pass, and that's even though it's a missed shot, that's still a really good shot. And I think as you start to find better spacing, better timing, and people moving off each other and understanding where they are, like these are the types of shots that are going to go in, and these are the types of shots you need to be able to get every single time to be a successful team.
Yeah, just plain and simple, good play there, good pass, good extra pass, wide open shot in the corner. You're going to rate that, and your coaching staff as a very good offensive possession. You just didn't make the shot. That's all.
Mhm. Now, solution to having non-shooters or forwards on the perimeter. So they get into what's called pistols action. Here you have a guard to guard step up. and then the player will come off a flare screen. Now it's Kia coming off the flare. They find that they overplay the flare because obviously Kia is identified as a shooter, and they find Fegbenley attacking the rim. Now, the part that I really like this is Sabally is not just standing on the perimeter waiting for a pass. She actually comes down and screens for Sykes, who's in the opposite corner. So rather than standing, she's actually going to go screen rotations to be able to get the player that they want with the ball on the perimeter an open shot. Passes maybe a little bit low, but again, they get a wide open jump shot because they've created an advantage. They forced help, and in here, they've gone one step further and they started to screen rotations and get their best players the ball where they want them to. Another solution to forwards on the perimeter, or maybe non-shooters on the perimeter, we have a simple ball screen action, create a little bit of an advantage, get downhill, good kick out pass. This might be an opportunity where Alamond, you might want to be a little bit more aggressive either with a shot or re-attacking. But she sees that Key, or number 7, is wide open at the top because her check has come down to help. And on the kick out pass, rather than just standing or rather than shooting, maybe the person you don't want shooting, she quickly gets into a handoff and a little bit of a ball screen or a flip and a ball screen to create an opportunity for Mabry. Now, Mabry hits a really difficult shot in between two people, but again, at least it wasn't just catch and shoot or catch and freeze. It was catch and how quickly can I get into a little dribble handoff or a little ball screen. I think that's the next step for some of their forwards. Can we screen rotations? Can we kick out and if the ball touches their hands, how quickly can we get the ball into the players that we want to make shots and make decisions with the balls in their hands?
Yeah, just ultimately a good quick decision there. Maybe she could have, Element could have probed and penetrated a little bit off of that, but she made a super quick decision, made other defenders active and got the ball into arguably their best offensive player in Mabry and let her make plays.
Now, to show different solutions, and by no means are we saying this is what Sandy is going to do. This is what I do, and we show what Brad does, just to give people a concept of obviously we work on sets and we work on defense, we work on rebounding, but one of the things I don't know if people fully understand is as the levels go up, so much of it is we've created an advantage. How do we keep the advantage? How do we space? How do we provide room for the ball to play? How do we able to keep an advantage by making the pass and understanding where all 5 players are going to be on the court at the same time? Terminology might be a little bit different. Obviously, the spacing is very differently because we play 4 out, 1 in. I think you guys play for the most part 4 out, 1 in. Obviously, Sandy's Coach Brondello is creating a situation where it's mostly 5 out. So the concepts are going to be a little bit different. So it's just one way to do it. And then we're interested to see how she does. And then we can develop some of these notes and some of the video based on what we're seeing in some of her spacing concepts as we go through. So here's what we do with the women's basketball team here at Western. So some basic concepts. If the ball attacks towards you, we want to push away from the ball to create space. So here you can see we're going to get into a simple ball screen spread, very similar to what the tempo do. And the player on that weak side, closest to half court, as the ball screen happens, we want her to actually go away from the basketball because teams are getting really good about that first off-ball defender coming over to support to prevent the ball from getting downhill. And just by creating that little bit of push, we created a really long closeout and an opportunity to shoot the ball. So if the ball attacks towards you, we want to push to create space. Sometimes when we end up in situations where we want to create space for the ball, we obviously have 2 people that are standing on the perimeter in a situation away from the ball. So here we have a ball screen spread, very similar with the tempo do. We want the person who's standing on the opposite 45 to create space for the ball. So we want her to push. But you see there's a player in the corner that is sort of in the way. And if we push too far, we're going to allow 1 to guard 2. So what we would do is what we call clear. And that person will actually back cut off the corner, and it creates a little bit more pressure on the rim. But more importantly, it creates a little bit more space for the ball to play, and it creates a little bit more space for us to push into. So here you can see off the ball, we push and we clear from the corner. And if people come to help either early or late, sometimes we'll get that little dump off to the rim. Now, that's in front of the basketball, but the same is true from behind the basketball. So here again, a spread ball screen. We have the player who's at the opposite 45 who's going to push. We have the player from the opposite corner who's going to clear. And behind the ball, because she's gone away, we're actually going to pull behind or fill that space that she just vacated. So as she attacks, player from the corner comes behind, and we always have that last pass behind that we can go. And this one I really like too, because that clear pass, we continue that next pass or that pass for the wide open jump shot. Now, forwards. Now, in this situation, it's not a forward, but the concept is the same. If we attack the rim, we want to circle under to provide space for the ball to attack. And if two people come to the ball, you get to little dump offs for layups on the other side. And that's something that we showed through some of the tempo that I think as they get used to it, those little dump offs, and that respects Key. Tiona Key was wide open. And can you find that pass for little uncontested layups? Couple more little concepts. Anytime that we have baseline penetration, we always want to make sure that the opposite corner is filled so that we have the width of the court used. In our base concepts, in this situation, the ball be going away, so we'd want to pull behind almost like a big circle. But because of this one exception, we always make sure that the opposite corner is filled so that we have a chance to attack rotations and use the full width of the court to play. And nice patience and pivot to finish through contact. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to create an advantage. Here you have a situation where we have sort of rescreen, no advantage gained, baseline penetration gets cut off. We're in good spacing, but you never want to just stay in your spot. If we have to slow down, if we have to pivot, if we have to spin dribble or something freezes, you always have the opportunity to back cut. And because of our forward spacing, there usually is huge opportunities to get those secondary cuts if the first player is covered. One more concept, and we've talked a little bit about it. Open pass. You can see the player in the corner is open, but you might not have an angle. Use a little bit of a dribble and attack. There's your extra pass, or your pass, as some people call it, or one more. One more little special situation, and I put this in here because I know the tempo go through this an awful lot, where they end up in a ball screen situation with Euro spacing or three people on the weak side. We like to do what's called a slice. So you can see here the person of the opposite 45 as we're attacking on the step up will actually back cut, and in some cases even screen the rotations to be able to get open jump shots. So that's another exception or a special situation that we're in. Very similar to what the tempo do, but that's how we solve the problem about spacing with three players on the weak side. Anything about we do, Brad? You gonna pick it apart? You can tell me all the things I'm doing wrong?
No, I was just the one clip I couldn't. I saw you on the sideline and I got mesmerized by your OVO jacket that you had on, and then I lost concentration of what was going on.
For those of you guys who don't often watch Western women's basketball broadcasts on OUA TV, Brad so kindly did our postseason game or our first round game. I think you spent about 2 minutes making fun of me for not having Drake on my playlist and all sorts of other OVO related humor. So if you get a chance, Brad's is also a stand-up comedian on our broadcast whenever he gets an opportunity to call our games.
Don't get all sensitive about it, Nate. Don't get all sensitive about it.
All right, I'll let you take this over because I know you teach spacing concepts very differently. For those of you guys who don't know, Coach Campbell did a really good championship production video just on his spacing concepts. And I highly recommend if you're a high school coach or you're looking to do something maybe a little bit different with spacing concepts, definitely like you're world renowned in terms of how you play or how you continue advantages. And I know your teams have been some of the highest scoring teams in Canada based on some of the spacing concepts that you've run as well.
Yeah, and again, with all of this too, it's all preference, it's experience, it's what you're comfortable with. Again, like I said at the earlier in the pod, really interested in seeing how Sandy Brandello's and her staff's spacing concept works. Something I'm not that familiar with, but really looking forward to learn and seeing what they do out of it. Some of the stuff that we do, it's been stolen and taken from other concepts. I'm sure there's going to be stuff I'm going to see the tempo do that I'm going to take and try to incorporate in what we're doing as well, always trying to evolve and learn with what's going on. So part of the fun for me in analyzing and taking a look at a lot of what they do too is like, how can I learn off of this and use some of these things as well? So super interested to see that sort of 5-out concept and how they're using some of the pieces and players and trying to come up with strategies to deal with like spacing solutions and whatnot. So, we also run a 4-out 1-in concept. Um, terms like we used a little bit earlier in the pod in terms of straight line drives and double gaps and penetration, drawing two. We're just trying to play selfless, move the ball and stretch the floor as much as we can to create advantage and give our players a little bit of freedom to shoot the ball and make decisions. So as we get into, these clips, Nate, let it roll there, is get a defensive stop here. We run a two-side fast break concept. So again, if we can't get what we call the fire drill, if we can't get a numbered advantage, a 2-on-1, a 3-on-2, we're always trying to headman the ball, to put defenders on islands, as we call them, where they can't get any help, where they'd be isolated to only cover one player. So if we can have, like, first thing is we need players in front of the ball. So if we can get players ahead of the ball, then we can headman it and try to attack in those situations. A two-side concept, we're going to have two players on one side of the floor, one in the corner, and one above the three-point line and the sideline, and then we're going to have one in the opposite corner, and then our five, who we identify, is going to run to the rim. So in this clip, if we keep it rolling, our point guard gets to the two side. Okay, so on that side, so hold it right there. We've got two players, the player with the ball. We've got someone in the corner, and then we've had our five at the rim. And you can see as the team we're playing is recovering, they're having trouble playing and making a decision on who they're covering, because our opposite corner's open, the five-man's open, and we've got an extremely good shooter, led the country in scoring on the strong side corner, so they're going to be worried about him, right? So now as we let the clip go, a great pass, no one for some reason covered the basket. So again, we're just trying to play fast, space properly, and make the other team defensively make decisions. Scouting report, like I said, they're going to be super worried about the strong side corner because who's there? Somehow they left the rim open. Good pass by our ball handler, and we'll take the layup in that situation. Next clip. Here we get a steal. We're going to run the floor. There's a hit ahead. So right here, this is the single side. So on our two-side concept in the break, we've got corner and the opposite side being filled, but we go and we hit ahead to the single side. So the number 4 who's going to receive the ball is sort of on his way to fill the corner, but since he's open, now he's going to attack. We've got our 5 filling the rim a little bit late. He's at the foul line right now, but he's still going to continue to go to the rim. 4 is going to attack the paint, let it roll. Okay, and there's the kick out. Again, the defenders, how are they recovering? We've got another excellent shooter. We've been very lucky to have some awesome shooters and excellent shooters. So you've got to get out, and it's open. We're going to give that player the freedom to shoot the ball. Here comes the shot. Right, shot goes up, and luckily it went in there, but sort of a clean looking transition. Again, defensive clip. Going to get the missed shot, going to get that rebound. Now we're busting out. You can see our 5's going right to the rim. Okay, now hold it right here. Since we have a two-side concept, both corners are filled. The other two-side is, you can just see him sort of on the edge of the film right now. He's emerging into the video. Our point guard now has a lot of room to break somebody down in essentially a double gap spacing. It's going to be very difficult for any defender to help on his penetration right now. So Nick Farkic was an awesome point guard for us a few years ago. Run the clip. He's going to be able to get into the paint. Little floater right there. And he was very efficient with that shot. Here's another clip as we're going to break out. Okay, we get to the two side. We call that action a bam bam. Okay, which means a pass and a pass back very quickly. And now the top side of the two side is going to attack, and now we're going to get into spacing. So as he attacks, the 5 was filling in late. His man came over and rotated. We got the foul off that situation. So again, all our spacing concepts that we're talking about we're trying to create all of these advantages, maybe in some different ways, maybe with a little bit of different styles of doing it, but we're all trying to create these advantage situations, hopefully. Yeah, so again, defensive possession here, go get that rebound. Okay, we're going to get on our two side right here. Okay, now,
Oh, sorry, another two side.
so
Sorry about
one
that.
two side concept is you want to go early and opposite. So if you just rewind the clip just a little bit, okay, there's lots of stuff on the internet and videos, et cetera, on the two side break. A friend of ours, just hold it there, Nate. Friend of the channel, Basketball Immersion. I would recommend them highly. Chris Oliver, former coach here in Canada, now runs Basketball Immersion, an unbelievable basketball resource to go and check out. Like I said, friend of the channel. He's big on two side and has all kinds of videos and YouTube instruction and other things on the two side concept. One is early and opposite. So our point guard right now is going early and opposite as fast as he can to the opposite side of the floor, which is the high side of the two side. So let it go. Okay. Now, as you can see, obviously it's a little blurred, but that defender has to play two people. Who's he going to play? And if we have two good shooters right there, and that was one of the better shooters in the country in the corner, and he's going to get the green light to shoot it. We've just created a two-side. And by the way, the other players up top is a really good shooter too. It just puts the defense in a position, and we're going to give our guys freedom to shoot the ball. Here comes the shot. And we're, again, as a coach, I'm willing to live with those shots because that's just the way we've decided to play. So, and that feeds into the system that we're running as well. Next clip. Good defense giving up a wide open shot there. Hope he didn't make it.
We're not talking defense on this.
No defense
podcast.
today.
No defense here.
Today.
This is the Bill Murray podcast. No defense.
No defense. So as we're pushing it, okay, you can see right here now it slows down a little bit. The good thing there is the ball side corner went right to the corner to get some good spacing. Where it looks like we're filling in the opposite side a little bit on delay, but our post went to the rim, and now he's not right at the rim. He might be more on the block. It probably would have been better if he went to the rim and then went out to the block. But that's a rookie right there, so the rookie might have went more to the block. But it's still, we get a post touch, and now we're going to read off that post touch. So if we let the clip go, okay, he makes a good cut and a good pass to the basket to just create offense off that spacing with a cut. Clip keeps going, and makes a tough layup there. And we did, so that right there, that's kind of basketball. We didn't, there's no play calls there. That was just straight spacing, post catch, read on a cut. We don't need to necessarily call a play when we're in transition. We want to play out of our spacing to create that. So here probably comes more of a half court clip. Getting the ball thrown in a press situation. Now we got to bring it up a little bit slower. So this team, here comes a double. Now hold it right here. We've spaced the floor. So there's a player in the strong side corner we can't see on the film right now. So we're stretched. We pass to the open player. We have our post who's starting to come out because we run a little bit of dribble handoff 5-out action, but we start our post down low to begin with. But at least right now, look at the scramble that's caused because of just good spacing and hitting the open man. Now two's got to make a decision. So is he going to shoot it? Is he going to one more it into the corner? He could dribble it middle. Obviously, the five's there, so that might not be the best. The five might have started low for him to penetrate. I think our player here, Tiny, decides to shoot the ball, let the film go. Okay, they'll dribble in, create an open shot, give him the space to shoot it there. So again, that clip, just probably more spacing out of anything, helped to create that opportunity. Here's another clip. Start with the defensive end. Missed shot there. So we're going to push it. So we sort of started low. So now we had to hold it right there. We had our number 5 who's in the corner here. He went to the rim. He probably should have spaced out to the corner. Maybe thought he could get a layup. So now we got to keep our spacing right. So if we just go back a little bit on the clip, we run like a transition ball screen right here. So the 5's trailing. The 5 is going to go ball screen. Okay. We turn the corner, good hard sprint to the rim here off that ball screen. Now, right here, number 2, you can see is really starting to come up to the middle. We space in a thirds concept. So in our third concept, the ball's in the paint. Our 5 who went to the rim is going to space low. And then we've got 2 players in the corner. They've got their third on the outside third to space and get ready. Tiny, who's number 2 up top, he's got the top third to space. So again, and it's hopefully giving the ball handler better opportunities. So you can see on this drive how many players that the opponent has in the paint. And now we've got to make our ball handler just make a good decision, pass to an open player. I actually think he finishes the layup here and goes to the basket. But if he could finish that clip, he had a left-handed layup there as well. Okay, so again, spacing essential after that ball screen takes place to give the ball handler not only an opportunity to score, but to read defenders who are helping. And now we just got to make a good decision.
And it's funny because you define decisions a little bit different, use a little bit different terminology, but a lot of times we're creating the same thing. So you had the player who held the corner. If they were a little bit higher, they might have to push, but you're trying to create a double gap to attack. You had someone pulling behind, whereas you defined essentially get to your third and then make a decision to get open within your third. Obviously, we're a little bit more structured in terms of what the decision is, but a lot of times we're trying to get to the same thing. We're trying to create space for the ball. We're trying to make sure that rotations have a long way to go. Really just trying to make sure that one person can't guard 2 at any one particular time.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges for players, I think, is, sort of your mind wanders and things. One of the hardest things to do is to, if you don't have the ball, is to be focused and to space properly. So even like if you rotate that clip back, and again, this is where in professional basketball, when you get to higher levels, as number 3 uses this ball screen, number 2 has to be entirely focused on what he's doing. It'd be easy for him to just mentally shut down and to stand right where he was to start that possession. But we got to maximize this possession again right now. So as the ball's getting into the paint, 2's got to get up there and space properly to maximize, because he doesn't know what the decision is going to be made, and he's got to make it easier for that individual with the ball to make a decision. So part of that next level of spacing an offense and what pros are going to be able to do, and that's why they are pros, right, is to get to these next levels of spacing or correct. Maybe there was 2 guys standing beside each other. Okay, we got to correct this immediately and find a way to make the spacing right. So this is the mental focus aspect of the game, which is so important. Like, you can't just stop playing. There's always something to think about. Again, on a past pod, I unfortunately I use some baseball terms at times, and in baseball, there's 9 players on the field, and when the ball is hit or something happens, like all 9 players have a job to do. You got to cover if someone's going to throw to first base. A player has to cover the throw behind it unless it's missed or it goes by. Like, there's other jobs you have to do when you don't have the ball. You have to be mentally engaged. So this is the same thing in spacing and in basketball. Like, you constantly have to be thinking, or hopefully not thinking eventually, because you're just reacting because you've done it so many times. But that next level of what's my next job? Get to your spot, do it, spacing properly in what we're talking about.
Yeah, and again, 2 weeks in, no one, whether they're professionally or otherwise, should be expected to be able to think as a collective unit. Like, these are going to be the small details that are going to determine whether the season is successful or not. But I think based on Coach Brondello's past record, I'm really confident she'll be able to do it with some of the players. And I'm just looking forward to see how she solves the problems, like you said, a little bit different than maybe we do, so we can steal a little bit in piece that might fit what we've put in with our teams. But it's really interesting to see how coaches approach the same problems, because we all go through the same problems. It's how do we understand, how do we teach, and how do we get our players to understand and execute to be able to solve some of the problems that we see as defenses get better and better and adjust to what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. We got another clip in here.
Couple more, I think. Not
A
too many
couple
more.
more. Holy moly.
I know. You guys just do a lot of stuff. Here's funny knock action, similar to what Tempo does.
Yeah, yeah. So we run a little flare screen off it. So then a ball screen to fall. So again, right here, with our spacing, It could have been a little bit better, but we had a corner space. We got 23 in the corner drift. 15's up top. The original point guard probably should be filling in behind on that side because if you look at the strong side of the floor, there's too much open space there. Someone's got to fill that in. Our 5 is rolling down to fill the drop off. So here comes the drop off pass, and then makes a tough left hand finish there. But again, even on a successful clip like that where the ball goes in, we still somebody still didn't space properly. And that's going to happen obviously throughout the course of a game and a season. But can we just get enough good spacing maybe to maximize possessions? Here's another one.
Have you ever seen a clip where all 5 players have done the right thing the whole time for the whole possession where you wouldn't have
It
anything to
happens.
teach on?
It might happen. It's rare. It could happen at times, but obviously there's going to be mistakes and things happen, or you're going to have weird spacing at times, and that's why you mentioned early in the podcast maybe Coach Brondello has a reason to play older players. This is probably why coaches want experienced and older players because they're going to do more right things the time than younger players would, and hold the integrity of things a lot better. We talk about, the integrity of our spacing. Like we have to hold the integrity of it because once it starts to break down, we're probably not going to have good offensive possessions unless somebody just makes a low percentage shot or something, which could happen as well at times, right? But next clip here, coming up against some pressure. Okay, so we just run a little bit of a half court ball screen to alleviate. Now we're going to play out of some space. So right here, you can see it's almost like, so let's think about this almost if you rewind just a little bit, Nate. Say if you ran a spread ball screen in the quarter court, this is almost like a spread ball screen to a certain extent, but right at half court where we set the screen. So this clip, just a little bit more spacing. We pass it, not the greatest pass, it's tipped. So now how do we hold the integrity? We should probably make a little bit quicker decision. Another ball screen, just a quick pass, and then now we're back into the corner. So this clip's maybe good just from the court is well spaced at this point, right? Like if you just look right now at the players on the court, it's going to be difficult for one player to cover 2 defensively. So number 3 fell on his backside after he passed the ball. He got up. He continued to play. He got to the corner. We spaced out of it. However, they were playing ball screen defense. We got it into the corner. Number 3, again, is a very good 3-point shooter. As we roll the clip in, he just gets a good, clean look and winds up making that one in the corner. But that clip there, a bunch of things maybe didn't go right, but the integrity of the spacing held, which allowed us to create a good shot for a good shooter.
I worked with Noelle Quinn with the senior national team for 2 years, and she was the head coach with the Seattle Storm. She now coaches in the Unrivaled League. And anytime someone would make a 3, same comment every single time: corner 3 gets paid. So if there's young players watching this, work on the corner 3, because if you can make that and be able to stretch a defense, it's invaluable. Corner 3 gets paid.
Yeah. So again, as we've mentioned, a lot of different spacing concepts here. Super interested in Brondello's open post style of break and then spacing and then flowing into their offense after that. There's secondary breaks, there's primary breaks. But I hopefully, people could get an idea today of just how important spacing is to offense and how vital it is. Obviously screening and other things are extremely important, ball handling and shooting and passing, not discounting any of that. But if you aren't trying to space and maximize for as long as you can on the floor, you're probably not maximizing as much good quality shots as you can produce.
And I know so much of us and our job is pattern recognition. We watch a lot of WNBA games, and a lot of people are running the same stuff. We watch, our level and scouting other teams, and there's some very familiar actions and spacing and concepts. Part of the reason I'm really excited is because this differs. It's different. It doesn't necessarily match what we're used to, and that's sort of what we're pointing out. But I more pointed out because I'm really excited about it. Something different than what we do. And then the second piece to this, why I was really excited about talking about spacing, is It's probably the concept we work the most on. I've seen your practices, and I know how much you do it, working with senior national team and preparing for an Olympics. I know Coach LaPena, when he was with us for 2 years with their senior national team, this is the concept he worked on most. So I think at the really higher levels, like these are the concepts that people work on the most, and they're so exciting when you see something different, when you see someone who's attempting to fit her personnel and trying to look at the problems in a different way, because this is how we all grow, because we all steal and we all sort of beg and borrow from each other and sort of pick little bits and pieces. So maybe this is more of a selfish podcast because I'm excited to see it. So I've really enjoyed it though.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot of fun, not only to see the tempo's evolution, but little aspects of the game as basketball coaches and kind of nerds and people who love this kind of stuff like you and I, as this gets cleaned up and evolves moving through. Somehow, if you made it this deep into the podcast, again, subscribe, like, share. You could also hear the pod, whether this is on audio, you can hear it on Spotify at Talking Tempo. You can check out the video portion on YouTube. Also, check us out, the term Talking Tempo. And the same is true for our Instagram page. You want to message us as well, you could send us some messages through Instagram or talkingtempo@gmail.com as well. And if we ever get some questions at any point, which maybe we could do a little question and segment and answer some questions at any point in some future pods as well.
Appropriate questions. Not all questions will be answered.
Yeah. No life questions, just basketball questions, please. We've got no ability to answer any life, financial, or otherwise questions that are going to help you in life. Just basketball
That's all we're good for.
is what we're trying to focus on. Appreciate you listening. I believe the next game we got coming up is Wednesday. What's Wednesday? The 13th?
Yep.
13th of May. Wednesday, another home game. I think that's against Seattle. So again, we're gonna have lots of games coming up, lots of tempo action. Watch the tempo, support them. I think all their games are on TSN here in Canada. Obviously, if you've got the WNBA pass or fans of other teams, you can either your local channels or through that WNBA pass that they have to watch. Again, that initial temperature. Thanks for listening to the pod. And Nate, any final comments?
Kia Nurse is 1 for 1. She's shooting perfect. She should retire undefeated and not missing a shot on home soil.
Best percentage shooter if she retires right now in tempo history at 100%.
First made shot in the preseason, undefeated, and not a missed shot so far in the regular season. Love it.
Absolutely. Thanks
Have a good
again,
one.
and we'll see you next time.